Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Nerds. Wow, camera did funky things. Oh, it just had a seizure. It's still having a seizure. Okay.
You look fine to me.
On my end, it's like tweaking like crazy. That's weird. All right.
On Twitch, you look okay.
Okay. I'll just have look like I'm having a seizure on my end, but it looks like I don't like that. All right. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. We'll just get things underway. Uh, Welcome back to Nerds of Legends. Sorry about the weird technical issues right at the top there, but I think that we're doing okay now. And
Powerful illusion magic.
I am Ben, and next to me is Brenden. It's just going to be the two of us today. Joel's unavailable. We're going to do our Norse Legends episode tomorrow. But
More nerds, extra
we
nerds.
decided, you know what? We both went and saw the D&D movie. How about we talk about the D&D movie?
Very
So
topical, extremely
me and
topical.
Brendan just saw it recently, and we were shooting the shit, and everyone was like, "Why don't you guys just make an episode about this?" So we just decided to. Uh,
Ben's being nice. We were talking a lot about it, and
yeah,
Joel's like,
that's why
"This
we
is."
start. That's why we started like 45 minutes late the other day.
We're talking the movie. You're like, "This is gold. Turn this into views. What are you doing? Let's get on Twitch."
Yeah, so I guess the big thing is where should we start? Brendan, what did you think about the movie?
All right, so Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. I still remember the scars on my heart from seeing the 2001 movie
Yeah.
with Jeremy Irons, and I remember he was interviewed as to why he did the movie, and it was something like he had bought a castle and needed to pay it off or something, and
Oh, really?
you know, purely mercenary reasons. And I remember he was hamming it up almost as badly as Ray Liotta in the Dungeon Siege movie, and I'm like, oh, my 12-year-old heart was just wounded by the suck, right?
Yeah.
And so I see this trailer. It's D&D. That the heart gets a flutter, and I see Chris Pine, and there's good Michelle Rodriguez. There's good casting.
Hmm.
A buddy of mine, you know, Tom, we religiously watched the Fast franchise.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, it looks pretty good. The trailer's cut pretty well. It's humorous. Let's give it a shot.
You're like,
I mean,
oh, they got a budget.
yeah. It's just like, they, they got their talons in. Hasbro. Apparently, the movie had been in. There had been a litigious battle over the rights to have D&D movies,
Hmm.
and so I think Hasbro won or whatever. And
So, like,
is it
you mean like Wizards and Hasbro, or
um uh they were shopping the rights out to the studios,
okay,
and I forget if it's Universal or what studio won the rights.
someone claiming they still had it from the last time they made a D
So,
and D movie?
something along those lines. Paramount distributed and produced. Um, so I was like, you know what? I'll wait a week. I think a lot of people are like, we'll wait a week. It's going up head to head with the Mario Brothers movie, but it's D and
Well, it
D. I
came up
mean,
right around the same time as John Wick, and
right. And I'm like, there's so much of me is D&D at this point. I've got my dice from when I was 13. I got from Toys R Us. I've got first ed, second ed AD&D. I've got a Gary Gygax autograph on a first ed player's handbook. I'm like,
look at me, I'm Brendan. I got Gary Gygax.
it's not a pride thing. It's a terminal addiction thing.
Yeah,
And I was like, yeah, fine.
you're a collector. We understand.
Yes. And you know what? Having walked in with no expectations, having only seen one trailer, because there's a tendency now to reveal too much in the
Yeah.
trailers. Having seen minimal content, having a lot of background knowledge about D&D, this movie had no business being as enjoyable as it was.
Yeah.
It
Knowing the history,
the the absence of suck was surprising. It was
Yeah.
very surprising. Um, it had an actual narrative. It wasn't just if you've seen South Park, it's not just member berries. It's not just excessive referencing. It's not just see this, recognize that. You know,
Yeah.
there's a cohesive narrative. Uh, I feel like there are two ways to watch and enjoy this movie. There's appreciating it almost from the perspective of your family or friends who don't play,
Hmm.
appreciating it from a cinematic narrative
Yeah.
perspective, and then the we are the nerds of legend, right? The basement, the
Yeah.
basement dwelling perspective.
Us
Um,
grognards down in the basement as
right,
paint
right.
goblins.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like, oh, Aarakocra. Oh, okay,
Mm.
Tabaxi. Oh, okay, Halfling. Oh, there's a dwarf.
Oh,
You
there's
know,
a
there's
dragonborn, you know.
right, right. There are Easter eggs. Um, they have a nice balance of staying cohesive to the rules and also realizing, hey, this is a movie, and that being sticklers to the player's handbook or whatever is secondary to a good
Yeah.
story. It's kind of like I was like 11 or 12 when I was watching the Disney Hercules, and I'm like, oh, they forgot the labor where he impregnates 50 women at a wedding party in one night,
Uh, uh,
and
so
and
one
my
thing I was happy about,
it's like it's the art of adaptation.
one thing I was happy about was they didn't go like the gamers route, where it's like, oh,
Mhm.
this is like people playing characters. They're like, you know what? Let's just like tell a D&D story on screen.
Mhm.
No, we don't have to go flip flop between. And then the DM said this thing, and we're like, ah, that's against the rules, you know. And none of that crap. They just like told a D&D story
Mhm.
within the universe and like did it did it well, you know.
it was
Um,
it was the right decision
mhm,
not to have the real world and flipping into the game world. You see a lot of fan-made movies, Harmon quests, where you have people playing around a table and then it jumps to a story. I think it was the right decision not to do that.
mhm.
There are subtle hints. There's the character Chank the Paladin, who you could argue is a
Oh
DMPC. You
yeah.
could argue he's a Gary Stu, but he also has the trope of being like the one guy who can't make it to all the games.
Yeah.
You've got like failing the concentration check.
You can smell
You
the
know,
crit fails and you can smell the crit successes. It's just like you're like, "Oh, crit
there's
failed
no.
that," you know.
It's not like the cartoon. There's no little magical DM, but you could see where a DM would have been like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
So again, yeah, it toes the line between being a D&D player and trying to watch a good movie.
Yeah.
I guess spoiler alert.
Yeah.
We could cover the actual narrative and the actual storyline. Uh,
I
Chris
think
Pine,
I
Chris
think we could
Pine
just
rather. Yeah, go
talk
ahead.
about our favorite parts. We don't I don't think we have to necessarily
This
do
isn't
an
like a book.
overview. Yeah, this
It's
is
not like our
different
book
from the book
reviews.
reports, you know.
Eighth grade book reports, right? Yeah, sure. Man, oh, it kind of they meander. They travel quite a bit. It's
Yeah,
it's where the
there's a lot of hand waving on travel times in this one.
which I mean
My preferred method of DMing anyway.
every DM does, right? So yeah, it takes place in Forgotten Realms. It's in
Hmm.
Faerun. So the movie starts in Icewind Dale. They're in a prison. Edgin and is it Holga?
Yes.
Edgin and Holga are the protagonists. Chris Pine is a fallen ex-Harper agent
Hmm.
who's a bard, and he hangs out with Holga the Barbarian. Um, so yeah, these go in Icewind Dale. They start in jail there. You find out that they were running a gang of thieves and got busted. They go to Neverwinter. They reference Baldur's Gate. They go to the Underdark. So it's very like if you're watching the movie and you don't play D&D, you're like, oh, okay, these are names. But if you play D&D, you're like, oh my gosh, Neverwinter Nights takes place here. Baldur's Gate
Yeah.
1, 2, and 3 take place here. Um, the DOS, EGA, VGA, Eye of the Beholder 1, 2, and 3 take place. Myth
Hmm.
Draenor and Xanathar, and
Yeah.
you know. So if you know, you know, and if you
And
don't,
what I
it doesn't
liked
make you
about
forget.
this movie was that they do that nod. It's like, oh yeah, we're in Neverwinter now, but and then they didn't fall into like that movie adaptation trap of
Yep.
just like character proceeds to look at the camera and go, Neverwinter is the place where blah 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 is the center of culture in the Forgotten Realms.
Yes.
Like.
Yeah, minimal exposition.
Hmm.
I think the strength of this movie was its balance. It
Hmm.
was a balanced meal. It's like
Yeah.
sometimes when you go to Golden Corral, you kind of load up too heavy on your first trip up to
Yeah.
the buffet, right? It's just like enough references that if you know the rules, I get it. It's like it's Faerun, I get it, but the strength is the narrative.
Yeah.
Chris Pine's character has to deal with loss. He loses his wife due to his own callous nature. He robs from the Red Wizards of Thay, who are the big bad evil guys of the movie, and they track him down while he's away, and they murder his wife. So he in his grief he sort of falls into theft and skullduggery, and is a fallen Harper agent. So his daughter sort of falls out of favor with him when he's thrown in prison, and you find out that Hugh Grant, who is the thief of the group, was pulling strings and manipulating to get them out of the way, and has poisoned his daughter's image of him.
Hmm.
And so they go on a quest to try, basically, to get it to actually
That was an
resurrect
interesting part of that
it.
because like he had no like there was no need for him to go back and like help that girl,
Yeah,
but he did it anyway. It's an interesting part of that character is because like there's
yeah,
nothing like he didn't care that he swore an oath to like protect this guy's daughter. Like he did it anyway, and then he like instantly made it to like about him and to his own ends. But like he didn't like have to do it. You know, I thought that
yeah,
was an
yeah,
interesting part of that. That
yeah. I think they dodged a bullet on this one rather than going, hey, here's Elminster, and hey, here's Drizzt, which, by the way, they removed Drizzt from the script rather late in
hmm
production, so he was supposed to be there. But like, hey, no Drizzt, no Xanathar, no Kelvin Blackstaff. We're not going to just name drop and just shoot IP all over the movie. This is about a guy who is trying to make up for past mistakes and connect with his daughter,
yeah.
and he's trying to find an artifact to bring his wife back due to his
It's
own
kind of like
selfish.
I'd say it's like a 3 to 5th level campaign.
Yeah, yeah. I will say they made character sheets for the
Did
characters,
they?
and they've all got more than like 100 HP.
Oh,
They're beefy. The
are they
official
beefy
character sheet.
boys?
Yeah, but
Okay. What
I
level are
mean,
they technically?
I mean, they don't even have races on there. They call them humanoids, and then
Hmm.
they have like so they don't have level or race on there. I'd say at
100
least
HP, they've got to be at least like level 7.
7. I was thinking 6, 7. Yeah. Holga is from a tribe of
Elk
violent
Totem.
barbarians. Yeah, 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 and she tried to have this domestic pastoral life with her halfling husband, played by Bradley Cooper. So I was really pleasantly surprised they didn't spoil that in the trailer.
Who apparently has
And
a giantess fetish.
yeah, yeah, he likes his ladies large, and and he just was impatient with how violently she was living her life, and he's like, you don't need to prove anything, you don't need to go questing, everything is right here for you. So she's trying to solve her failed relationship, which those can be very painful, and
She's trying to deal with the loss of her clan, even though the reason
that
she left
too.
the clan was because of the dude. And the dude's like, hey, you left the clan for me. Why don't you, like, stay with me? But I feel
Yeah,
like the other thing was, like, it wasn't because of, like, her husband. It was because, I think in the end, it was because, like, she found her own family with Edgin and, like,
yeah.
the daughter.
There's some Fast and Furious vibes of like you make your own family with the people you meet along the way,
Yeah.
and
Family.
that's as Vin Diesel as it gets. There's no more, no less. There's no Vin Diesel cameo. There's no Critical Role cameo. I think that's a good thing. I really like it. It was like the J.J. Abrams Star Trek reboot where
Hmm.
all they have is old Spock. They don't go too heavy with the cameos. They don't go too heavy. Just enough reference to the old. A lot of new characters. Drizzt was supposed to appear, but he's replaced by Renee Jean Page, who is from oh, what's
Oh,
the
oh, apparently Elminster was there.
he's referenced
Oh yeah, I guess he
as,
was referenced. That's right, potentially.
Simon's Simon's a descendant of him. Bridgerton. He's sexy protagonist of Bridgerton, one of them at least.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I agree. Vin Diesel would make a great Minsk.
oh, Minsk and Boo already. Yeah, he'd be perfect.
Yeah,
That's the thing. No
definitely.
Minsk, no Chihira, no Eri, um, no Vaconia, right? So no Edwin.
So
They have plenty of
was
Red Wizards, but no Edwin. So
yeah
lots of material they could use later.
was the reference to the be to the axe that Holga got? Was that a reference to something? Because she said
Uh,
it's like, oh, you were made in this smithy.
a particular, I think, a smith of great renown. I think they were just referencing it was a masterwork weapon.
Oh, okay.
It could be a reference. There's
Masterworks
a
aren't as much a thing in 5e though.
well, you know me, my brain is perpetually third ed. I
Yeah,
mean, I see the world
I understand.
In Todd Lockwood's art, right? I
Yeah,
mean, we'll play games and I'll be like, oh, I got to make a reflex save, and you're like, no, that's not what it is anymore.
dexterity save, Brendan. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
So
sorry.
where are my skill points? Yeah. So oh, you did ask a long time ago what my favorite part of the movie was. I have to say it was probably the sequence with everybody's favorite tubby dragon.
Oh my god, when that thing popped out,
Them,
I was like, oh, it's a
Themberchaud.
dragon, and then all of a sudden he's like, like worms his way out of the thing. I was
There's a
like,
sort of there's a Mines of Moria escape-esque sequence with Themberchaud, and there's references to I think the is it the Durgar that I think worship and venerate him because you see there's like oh in the
so
Snurfeblin
that wasn't
because
super clear in that because they
it was
didn't
very
see
subtle.
anyone.
It was very subtle because like they have to cross a trapped bridge made by deep gnomes, and then you see statues,
Yes,
little
there's
statues.
the
It's
reference to Deep
very
Gnomish Bridge.
it's very
Yeah,
subtle. Like you have to be a terminal dork to
yeah.
get that. But Themerchod, he it's hilarious. It's over the top. Again, of if your DC is if your passive perception's high enough, you notice that Cenk uses smite on his sword,
Yep.
and he fights Thayan assassins that have flaming blades and
Green Flame Blade or
yeah
whatever.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah
You could
it's
tell like the one dude was like a warlock because he's using Green Flame Blade or.
right. Speaking of that, there's Simon. Simon is their sorcerer, and
Hmm.
he's related to Elminster. He's the descendant, and he has issues. He has performance anxiety with his magic, and he has issues with self-esteem. He's trying to rip off people with a magic show when they're trying to get the crew back together,
Yeah.
and he uses wild magic and causes a reverse gravity effect.
Yeah.
And they're very careful to be like, hey, I used wild magic. I don't know what happened because it's like, hey, he can't pick his spell book. He can't, he's not of level to write reverse gravity because he's
Hmm.
a sorcerer. So
Yeah.
they actually they try to stick to the rules a bit.
Yeah.
Um, oh, and then Doric is a tiefling druid, and she can polymorph into an owl bear,
Hmm.
which is she does so like 4 or 5 times in the movie,
Yeah.
and apparently there's some sort of internet harumphing and huffing and puffing about like oh you can't polymorph that many times in a day, and oh like owlbear isn't a choice, and it's like guys it's a movie right
Yeah.
it's like it's
Well,
cool
also
it's visually
now
it's
with
cool.
the
And
new way Circle of Moon
they
is,
they
it's
retconned it
fixed.
too. they,
Yeah.
they made they made it canon. They're like guys
Yeah.
shut up we made it canon. It was the sequences are great. She is very distrustful of humans because her human parents were
Abandoned her.
aghast at bearing a tiefling, so she grows up
They
with the
abandoned her in the woods, I believe it was.
yeah. So she's raised by the druids, and so she has cause to join them. Initially, she's very reticent. Edgin is he doesn't use any magic. He does a lot of
Yeah.
perform checks and stuff, and he's a lot of people are like, oh, he's played as incompetent. I think he finds his way. He's portrayed as more competent than let's say Big Trouble in Little China.
Well, it's kind of
Um,
like he's portrayed as like like he's the face, he's the planner. He like
right,
figures
and
out the intel and then like makes the plan.
initially they're like, what do you play the lute?
What do you
And
do?
yeah, it's like if the plan fails, then you're no good. But
He's
yeah,
like that's then I come up with another plan.
right. He's more competent than Kurt Russell in Big Trouble in Little China. He does perform checks. He's intelligent. He uses his charisma to keep his head on his shoulders.
Yeah.
And he's the glue guy. He keeps the party together.
Yeah.
He keeps them all working. A well-oiled machine. I think he's been doing a lot of roles recently where he's not interested in being a leading man. He plays Steve Trevor in Wonder Woman and Wonder Woman 84.
Hmm.
I think he enjoys. He was in Wrinkle in Time, the Disney remake, so he likes playing these roles where he takes sort of a. Even though he's the lead in this, he sort of isn't. He isn't like a Chris Hemsworth
Well,
character. He's not like a Superman,
I would,
uh,
yeah,
Ubermensch. He kind of
he's there to
take
kind
the
of like drag, bring up the other performers as opposed to like taking the spotlight sort of thing.
as, as we say in the squared circle. He puts people over.
Yeah, right.
He works. He works, and he's the character that helps you to relate. He's the link. He's the with dialogue, way more
Yeah, he's
dialogue
not like
than
he's not crazy strong. He's not crazy magical.
the
Can't
everyman.
turn into a deer. He can't, yeah,
Right, right. He is the everyman, and um, Michelle Rodriguez does great as Holga. She has this sort
yeah,
of like don't make fun of me because of my limited intelligence. She lashes out emotionally when she doesn't know how to express herself. She learns how to grow. She learns how to grow emotionally, and has time to grieve the loss of her husband.
hmm
Not literally dead, but this failed relationship. And Doric is initially distrustful and emotionally distant, and
it's like,
Simon has to deal.
just like all humans. Ugh.
Right, right, and but it's not played in an annoying way. She warms up to the party, and Simon
Mhm.
gets his mojo right,
Yeah,
and I really like the way that they portray attuning to magical artifacts, and like it's like your use magic item roll.
yeah,
Um, I like the way they portray it as metaphorically overcoming one's doubts and
yeah.
fears.
Especially like a powerful magical
Yeah,
object.
yeah, the movie is visually very striking. The budget is obvious. The movie looks way better than the 2001
Mhm.
version. It's
But
pretty
they didn't like lean on CGI though. There's like so many practical effects that they
practical
did.
effects. Yeah, the
Yeah,
Aarakocra, the Tabaxi, the Dragonborn are practical effects.
yeah.
They're not on the screen for too long, so
They
it's
didn't go
just
like
enough.
full red tiefling. She's got mostly like kind of like a pinkish hue, but she's like, flesh
Yeah,
toned. But they got like the horns or whatever. It's not like
Doric Doric is portrayed like a Tony de Terlizzi tiefling from like
Mhm.
um, Third Ed or Planescape. If you ever played a
Yeah.
Planescape Torment, right? She's shorter horns, more sub. It's not like a draconic tail; it's more subdued tail.
hmm
Very like Third Ed or Planescape Tiefling.
Yeah.
Um, just subtle enough. Like sometimes you see the CG swish of the tail, but it's
Yeah.
not on the screen too much. They knew when to use the budget and when not. You notice a lot of the characters in the party have full range of motion of their face and their eyes. They don't have like heavy prosthetics,
Yeah.
like heavy Klingon makeup in Star Trek. Remember, Christopher Plummer in The Undiscovered Country specifically asked not to have ridges because he wanted the full range of expression with his face it
Well, it
is the
helps they went with that as opposed like it helps that they did that instead of like using like dwarf characters. They went with like
right.
humanoid characters.
Humanoid characters, not like not a dragonborn, not like I mean there is a dwarf in the final sequence of the movie.
Yeah.
They're thrown into an arena. Apparently that dwarf is a reference, I think,
Yeah. To the old
to
D&D movie, the cartoon.
well so there's a dwarf that gets eaten by a displacer beast, and he's like
No,
a
he's
reference.
from that party from like the
So
old cartoon.
so there are two parties on either side of them. They're thrown in this arena. The party to the left of them are all the child protagonists from the cartoon. So
hmm
you have the paladin with the shield, you have the little kid barbarian, and you have the kid wizard in the green. So, but there's the other party that
hmm
gets wasted, and they
Yeah.
have a dwarf that apparently is a reference to like a podcast character or something.
Oh yeah.
So they have subtle references to like Mordenkainen and Elminster, but they don't
hmm
go over the top with mean skin Jaheira and Elminster and stuff. In like in the flesh,
Yeah.
there's no
I
druids.
think it was nice
It's
because they
just
didn't
enough.
like they just like made a movie that you could see as being a D&D campaign. They didn't just like
Yeah.
go. They didn't like you know blow their load all on one movie. You know what I mean? Like,
Right, right, and it's done in a way. I won't say the movie meanders. I would say the movie, like when you find out that Forge, their thief, double crossed them. It's relatively early in the movie.
yeah.
It's something that like maybe a lesser
Well, yeah.
script
So like
would have revealed at the end.
so
And
they, so they, yeah, because the whole point of it was like, oh, they figure out like, oh, it's Forge. oh, let's go talk to him. He's gonna know what's going on. He'll have the daughter's name escapes me. I can't think of her name, but
I can probably look it up real quickly.
she goes and they go and they meet with her. So then you have your conflict, and then so the two adventurers they have to go.
Kira is his daughter.
Kira. So
Yeah.
they're like, oh shit, we have to get Kira. She's like, because like, it's interesting because it's like similar to like how like I'd almost say like they start out the adventure the movie at like prop like four level 5 or whatever, and then by the end they're level 7, and like the whole
Yeah.
thing is like they started out, you get the sort of call to adventure or whatever, like, oh, we have to save Kira. And then they go through and they're like, all right, well, how are we going to save Kira? I was like, we got to find a magic user so that we can do some shit. And then they find him and they're like, well, you need and then the Simon's like, well, you need a druid to like infiltrate the castle. And they're like, where are we gonna find a druid? He's like, I know a druid. Like it's
I
like
will.
it's like a
Yeah.
session one, like boom, perfect. Like,
I will find. I've arrived at my answer. I will change it. I think my favorite sequence in the movie is when Doric infiltrates
oh, that was
uh,
so good.
the keep at Neverwinter to spy on the secret.
Totally breaks the rules, but it's fine.
Right, all
It was
right.
like
So,
epic.
so you find out that Forge Fitzwilliam and the original wizard from their party before they all got thrown in prison was a
Hmm.
secret red wizard of Thay,
Hmm.
and wants to invade Faerun and the mainland. And
Hmm.
so Doric polymorphs into various animals to spy and escape. And it's a meandering. The camera follows behind her as she polymorphs into flying animals and a mouse and a deer and all
What's
this stuff.
interesting is like how would I'm
Very,
confused
very,
how like
very.
the wizard chick would have like realized that there was a shapeshifter there.
So technically, you find out she's undead.
Detect
And
life.
yes, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, light vision. All right, cool. Or maybe her passive perception is really high based on her level. But
Yeah,
see, there's
but
there's
still
a D.
noticing a fly. I mean, but yeah, if you notice like a fly's been following you around, maybe like throughout the
Okay,
entire castle,
all right.
maybe. But
So for my OG '90s kids, you'll remember that particular issue or volume of Animorphs, where one of the, I think it's a dorky kid, he's spying on the enemy and he animorphs into a fly and he gets hit with a fly swatter, and then he turns back into a human, and his I think his leg is broken because
oh
he was hit with a fly swatter. So this reminded me of OG Animorphs. I was like,
yeah,
oh, cool. Um, and yeah, every character gets their due. I
yeah.
think Edgin, um, and this is what's really organic about it, is the narrative almost took its time perfectly,
Hmm.
like an organic D&D campaign where you have
Right.
weeks to sort of plan it, and it's like a Ghibli movie. You sort of you're on the lazy river. You're not on a racetrack,
Yeah.
and you arrive where you need to be. And Edgin learns to let go, and he realizes that trying to find this tablet to bring back his wife, he's trying to fix everything, when in reality he needs to let go and move on.
Hmm.
And his daughter, learns to forgive him, and Simon learns to trust in himself, and Torque is like, maybe all humans aren't so bad, and Holga's like, you know what, I don't need to prove myself to anybody. I have my family right here.
Yeah.
And they organically go on this journey together, and Cenk the Paladin might be my favorite character of the
Oh my
movie.
god.
He people I've heard people say he's not in the movie long enough. I think he's in there
Oh
perfectly.
yeah. He would
He's
have gotten
just
annoying
he
any
yeah, he
longer. Yeah,
yeah,
I would have. You would have been like, "Fuck this guy."
he's just like Billy Crystal in The Princess Bride. He's there to impart wisdom and knowledge just long enough to teach a lesson and then go on his way.
Right.
He's
And
clearly
also it's like the
he's over leveled. He's so high level. He's like probably level 10 or 12 or something.
yeah.
And
It's
so,
it's another one of those like never tell a joke more than 3 times. Like
yeah.
it's like there's the whole thing where he like doesn't understand like idioms or like figures of speech or whatever. Like they didn't overuse that. Like he just like they did that a couple times and then they were done. Like they didn't.
Yeah. Yeah,
but like if they would have kept him in, they like would have had to keep making that dumb joke, and you would have been like, "Fuck this guy."
yeah, yeah. One of the directors of this directed Game Night, which is a movie with Jason Bateman that I is it? Yeah, that I really really enjoyed. Um, that movie is almost more absurd, almost like a farce, like a farcical play, and it occasionally gets like serious, but it really is for a punchline. This movie has overcome the current MCU trend that I think is stagnating, where there's so much humor interspersed within the plot, you don't know what the tone is.
Yeah,
Um, I felt that I watched Amsterdam
yeah,
recently, which I think is it David Fincher that really bombed, and that movie did not know what tone it wanted. It reminded me
yeah,
of like Gremlins in the '80s. The original Gremlins movie I thought was totally inconsistent. That was
yeah.
its biggest weakness. And this movie, the humor is there to alleviate
Hmm.
stress. The humor is there to alleviate pain. People lash out at others with insults because they want to feel better about themselves, and the
Yeah.
humor was situational. Or if you find humor, you'll never find it. So the humor
Well, it's
is
like the point
covered.
where like
Yeah,
Holga like leaves, like finds out her husband has like moved on to another woman or whatever,
yeah,
and she's like comes out and she's like kind of like sad. And like the interaction that normally would happen with Edgin is he would have been like made some shitty joke, but instead he just like pulls out the lute and he's like, "I'm gonna play your favorite song," and then they
yeah,
like sing it
yeah,
together. Like
yeah. And the scene where Holga's ex-husband is like, "You need to move on." And it's like, I found someone else. It's supposed to be heartfelt, and they're both fully engrossed in their
Mhm.
performances. But he's so tiny because
Yeah,
he's a
it's
halfling,
yeah.
and his little hand is in her big hand. It's like it's naturally humorous. They don't
Hmm.
have to try too hard with it.
Right.
And it was
Yeah,
very
like they could have made a stupid short joke or something there, and they didn't.
right, right. It reminded me of Galaxy Quest, where it was like effortlessly funny due to the situation.
Yeah.
And there are zingers as well. Edgin's got charisma. He's a bard, so he's got some zingers. Um, Simon's failed magic rolls are hilarious. It's just
Well, and you pointed this out to me. I didn't
yeah,
realize it. He's got like this little dial thingy on his hip that he uses. I didn't
bag of
realize
holding.
it's a bag of
Yeah,
holding. I thought it was
yeah, yeah.
like, I thought it was like just like it's his like spell casting focus, but it makes more sense if it's the bag of holding. So
Yeah, it's sort of like it has little dials of almost like in Howl's Moving Castle, or like where the
hmm
castle's going. It has
hmm
little dials of like what he's removing from his bag of holding,
hmm
almost to visually show the viewer like what's going on. And for years I've always assumed it to be just a Crown Royal bag that has a bunch of stuff in it, right? So it was the movie was visually engaging, not too much. It wasn't over CGI'd. If you it reminds me of like the third act of the first Wonder Woman movie where there's so
hmm
much CGI you had no idea of depth perception or space. This
yeah,
movie, you always had an idea of where they were in the set, where they were interspatially. It wasn't over CGI'd, which is
hmm
shocking. There's this beautiful platonic relationship between Edgin and Holga,
yeah, and
where
like you're partially worried. I was like, please don't do what I think you're gonna do. Like you're
yeah,
worried the
don't
entire
make him go.
time it's gonna turn into them boinking, and it never does. And I was like,
It's
glorious.
beautiful. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. The movie passes the Bechdel test.
Hmm.
It's
Well,
it's
it's like the whole thing is like the whole reason is like they're friends because they basically like saved each other's lives at that point when they met, and instead of like being like, oh, here's another Hollywood love story, inject that into your veins, it's just like, no, these people are just friends, and he's gonna do anything to save his friends.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Edgin was a drunk when his wife passed.
Yeah.
He was going through his grief. They show a scene, which is hilarious,
She
where he
found
passed.
him. She found him passed out drunk in a bar with this like kid in a baby carrier, and then she's
with
like
with the baby, and it's
grabs
just
him by the ear and like drags him home, and he like wakes up the
yeah,
next morning.
yeah, and she's lost her tribe. He's lost his wife. They just naturally bond over raising Kira,
Yeah.
and it was a beautiful platonic relationship. You don't see a
Mm-hmm.
lot of them,
Mm-hmm.
and Cenk is a noble paladin. He doesn't try to hit on anyone in the party. Simon tried dating Doric, and it didn't work out, and that's their history with each other. He's like, that's how he knows her as a druid. He's like, they defeat evil. Spoiler alert, right? And at the end of the movie, he's like, you want to kind of try that again? She's like, okay, just. Don't get too excited.
Yeah. It's like
It's not.
yes, because he's like yes.
Yes, yeah. So they're very human. Everyone has faults. They're not. It's not over sexualized. It's not uber violent. It's a movie you can take your kids in. There's not a ton of profanity, I don't recall. I mean, you could probably take someone who's like 11, 12, and they'd understand the
Yeah,
movie.
I'd say the ratings right around where like you could probably do like yeah PG-13, maybe a little
Yep.
younger, you know.
Yeah, there's a very humorous scene where they speak with dead. Um, Simon uses a cleric token,
Mhm.
um, which it's like use magic item now or something where
Yeah.
you can use magic items cross class, and so he
Hmm.
does that. And
I think it's an actual. It's like coin of speak with dead or something like that.
yeah. So he didn't have to be a cleric to use it. There's no cleric in the party other
No,
than Shank being a paladin, but there's no
but like you use it and then it gives you get three questions and then like the first one
five maybe.
is it five?
It might be five. I don't. Yeah.
I think it
Um,
might be five. But the
but
first
they
the first guy that
yeah.
they raise, they accidentally like every time they ask a question, like the guy's like yes. No. It's like, no, 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 not you. It's like, how do we keep this from happening? I don't know. And
Yeah,
then like
and it dies.
then dies, you're like, fuck. So then they
So
go to the next body and then they slowly they like dig up like eight different corpses as like slowly figuring out like the information they need to find the
yeah,
MacGuffin.
yeah. It didn't feel too long. It didn't drag me. It starts with them in prison. They bust out, and there's a big
Jonathan!
what's that?
Jonathan!
Yeah, Jonathan, and he pretends to know the Aarakocra so that he can dive out of a window with him, which was hilarious, by the way.
Even though at the end they're like, wait, we approve your pardon.
We approved your pardon. The movie was really really funny.
Because like even
Yeah,
though like they like all like half of this trouble that happened at the beginning of the movie would have been solved by them just like accepting that they were gonna get pardoned.
being good people. Yeah.
But
The
instead they're
movie
like busted out and like
the movie has callbacks. So Forge is thrown back in prison after double crossing them, and he
mhm.
tries to wax poetic about his abusive childhood, and tries to jump out of the window with Jonathan or whatever. And then they
But they
they
bricked it up. Yeah.
they bricked it. They bricked it up. So yeah,
They
yeah. So
picked
there's
an
a
interior room for the
yeah. They had some exposition when Edgin describes his story to the
mhm.
parole board, but then it becomes like a fetch quest to find his daughter. But then there's the reveal that Forge is bad, and then they sort of go on a fetch quest to put the party together.
Mhm.
But then they run into roadblocks. They're like, "Oh, Simon didn't pass his DC to use this magic item, and we don't know. Oh, we've lost all our leads, and we have no money." And then Chen comes along and helps them, and Edgin has resolved to keep the party together. So it initially is like, hey, is this just gonna be a quest movie?
Mhm.
But no, in times of strife, when they're thinking of even breaking up the party, Edgin has dreams about his wife, it spurns him on to go back to find his daughter. There are multiple cases in this movie where it's not linear,
Mhm.
just like a really good campaign where he's like, we could give up the quest right now. We don't have any money, or hey, let's try this. There's a part where they steal all of Forge's money that he had been lifting off of people that they were like investing into the games, the gladiatorial combat at the end of the movie,
Yeah.
and they stop Forge and they're floating away in the boat with the money, and they realize that the big bad evil guy, the evil Red Witch of Thay, is trying to turn
Create a
everyone in the city undead to her whim, and they're like, we can't let this slide.
yeah,
Like we've
because
been
it's like a there's like it's like that moment where it's like if you had those people like earlier like at the beginning of the movie, all of them would have been like fucking someone else will figure it out.
right.
Like we got the money, we got Kira, let's go. But instead they're like, oh fuck, turn the boat
Well,
around.
Edgin had just won the approval back of his daughter, and he's with her, and
Yeah.
she looks up to him after he finally comes, earns her trust after years of imprisonment and
Hmm.
strife and questing, and he's like, I can't just like abandon a city of people now that I've just like
Right.
found my
But you
good
know what I
nature.
mean? Like there's like early on in the movie, they would have been like, that's not for us to figure out. Like someone
Yeah.
else will figure that out. You know?
Yeah, so there's redemption. There's initially you think there's loss. You think that Holga is killed by the poisoned blade of the Thane
Well, she
Witch.
was.
Yeah, yeah, which she does pass, and then Egan's yeah, like you know what? Everyone that's a good influence on Kira, everyone that raised her, that's not Forge, a
Yeah,
con man,
is
is
here.
right here. Everyone she needed, and he uses a tablet that he wanted to use to bring back his wife, to bring back Holga.
Mm,
It's this beautiful moment of growth and learning to move on. They use the metaphor of a butterfly, or it's a dragonfly, I think, that was in
yeah,
his house. He was trying to kill, and his wife's like, just open the window. Sometimes you need to let things move on."
yeah,
And yeah, yeah, it comes full circle with Forge being in prison instead of Edgin.
yeah.
Uh, it's obviously going to have a sequel. But
Oh
it's
yeah,
not over the head with like spoilers or trailers, or there's one mid-credit scene where they forgot to ask 5 questions of a corpse and it's still sitting up. Like,
yeah,
hello. It's not too heavy.
yeah,
It's beautifully self-contained. It's kind of like the first Fellowship movie,
yeah.
where Two Towers is so much bigger in scope, and it's like, well, we got to see the third one. Other than the uncertainty of whether or not the Fellowship will succeed in their quest, the first movie is actually beautifully rather self-contained in scope. Um,
Hmm.
it, and this movie, I feel like if the sequels get bigger, they'll have Drist maybe, or they'll have Minsk or something. This
Yeah.
movie is perfect for what it is. It felt like a wonderful meal. I was full at the end. I'm like,
Hmm.
I could buy a copy of this. I
Yeah.
do not own a lot of DVDs. I find them floating in the high seas, we'll say. So I'm like, I would put down money for this. I did not buy the obscenely large D20 popcorn bucket. I feel like Ben has enough for all of us. It is it. I had to fight
You
the
regret it,
urge.
don't you?
I
You
do
regret it.
regret it, but I
Should have gotten
also
it. You don't have enough dice for it, so
I
you're not a
spend ludic
goblin like me.
I spend ludicrous money on Games Workshop, so I think we're even. Speaking of which, I think the Arcs of Omen 5, The Lion, I think pre-ordered, was it this weekend? And that like the special edition sold out in minutes.
Oh,
All money, yeah, all that money. Grandma
so
Wendy's.
is Arcs of Omen, is that in 30K then?
No, no, no. So that's current timeline.
Okay.
It's basically the setup for the current storyline.
Okay.
Not to derail this video,
Yeah, sorry people.
dear
We're done
listeners.
talking about D&D. Now we need to talk about Warhammer because no one's here to stop us.
Joel can't stop us
Joel
learning out
can't,
of a
can't
40K.
stop
Um,
me now.
having such a good time.
Gonna talk about Warhammer.
Copyright strike. Yeah. So if you like, if you're a terminally stage 4 grognard like us, if you're obsessed with D&D, this movie is the perfect amount. In my opinion, I would rather it be a better narrative than just be full of references, and I think it did it
Hmm.
beautifully. I walked into this movie with no expectations and was pleasantly surprised by how not crappy. No, I'm not saying it's eh. It was a good movie. If you put it on a 10 scale, I give it an 8 too. I give it an 8.2. I was very
8.2? Yeah.
satisfied. It checked off all the boxes for me. It was all the fandom I wanted. Not too much. You always want, as a magician, you always want the audience wanting more with your tricks, right? It was just enough.
Yeah.
I want more. Good movie.
Yeah, I highly enjoyed this movie and I agree it didn't like beat me over the head with like I was worried we were going to walk in and be like every time someone casts a spell it'd be like, oh, that's a fireball, or oh, Bigby's hand, or oh, uh
Ice
earth and
Storm.
ground, yeah, ice storm,
Yeah.
like,
No
and
kill.
they didn't. It was like very subtle. I enjoyed it. I'd agree. I'd give it a solid 8. All right. With that, I think we're coming up on the end of our time here. Uh, thanks everybody for watching. We'll continuing on, we're gonna do a little raid on Quest Junkies UK. There looks like they're playing some Dungeons and Dragons or such like. They're doing the Redania Chronicles. Yes, they're playing Dungeons and Dragons. We're gonna give them a little raid. Um, Thanks everybody for watching. Just a reminder: tomorrow we're gonna come back and we're gonna do some more Norse legends. We're thinking about wrapping that up for a little bit, and then in which case we're gonna jump to some classic Greco-Roman mythology, since we're gonna be going into Will's campaign, which is based off of a lot of Greek mythology. I've
Which a,
created my
which a great
character,
mythology.
uh,
Exposed
and
chest hair, big chains.
oh
Get
yeah,
ready.
we're gonna dive right into it. I've already started making my character. I'm really thrilled with what Will's got in store. And then other than that, on Thursday we'll be back with working on finishing up Mop's storyline for Candlekeep Mysteries. Uh, and then on Monday we'll be back with our book talks, where we'll be talking about the third book of the Red Rising trilogy. And I just finished it, and I am very happy with how it ended, but it took me on an emotional roller coaster. So
Is
be
this
prepared. Be prepared for salt. So
I was gonna say time for salt.
thanks everybody, and we'll see you again uh, tomorrow, maybe. So give it a little sec. Rating in 3, 2, 1. Out.